In this installment of Anglicans You Didn't Know You Knew, I'd like to introduce you to another individual. This time is Robert Baden Powell, sometimes also known as Lord Baden Powell or even First Baron Baden Powell. Powell was born in London, England in 1857. He's the son of an Oxford professor, and he's number 8 of 10 children. Father's also a Church of England priest as well, and as well as a professor at Oxford. His father dies when Robert's about 3 years old, and therefore he's left to be raised by his mother. He goes to school at Charterhouse School, and there he learns some outdoor skills, if you will, some survival skills, things you might want to know whether you're camping or hunting or spending a long time outdoors. More advanced skills, even hunting, killing animals, things like that, skinning them. He later joins the Army after he finishes school, and he serves in the Army from 1876 to 1910. And while he's in the Army, as you can guess, he learns additional outdoor skills and survival skills as well. In 1899, during the Second Boer War in South Africa, Powell leads a successful resistance, successful defending of the town of Mafeking in South Africa. And this siege lasts 217 days. And during this time, they fend off this Boer army that is made up of about 8,000 men, they estimate. Powell is said to have played an instrumental role in the success of this survival and the survival of this siege. And of course, due to the skills that he learned previously, both in school and in the Army. These helped him to avoid the enemy, help him to navigate the countryside where he's fighting. In 1884, he publishes a book titled Reconnaissance and Scouting. So you probably start to know where this is going now. In August of 1907, Powell organizes what they call a scouting camp. And it's sort of a trial basis thing. He spends a week with 20 boys out in the wilderness. And they spend this week in the Brownsea, on the Brownsea Island. And there he teaches the young boys many of the outdoor skills that he learned, both again, at school himself and in the Army. Because of its success, an actual scouting movement begins to take shape. In 1909, there is the first National Scout Rally that's held in Crystal Palace. That's an exhibition hall in London. And there, 11,000 boys are said to have attended that event. There also a number of girls were actually interested in and wanted to be part of this movement as well. And so in the next year, 1910, the Girl Guides, as they're called in England, the Girl Guides, were formed by Powell's sister, Agnes Baden Powell. She then takes the lead on that. Needless to say, the scouting movement becomes a worldwide international phenomenon, organization, and it spreads very rapidly. Now, the First World War happens, and this unfortunately divides the world severely. And many of those who served around this time actually attested to using many of the skills that they learned in scouting, and they applied it to their training and their survival during the war. The war ends in 1920, and in that same year, an international scouting convention is held in London, and Baden Powell is there, and he's declared the chief scout. He remains active for many years, but in 1937 he retires from his leadership position in the Scouts. His letter to the Scouts reads in part, quote, "I have had a most happy life, and I want each one of you to have a happy life too. I believe that God puts us in this jolly world to be happy and enjoy life. Happiness does not come from being rich, nor merely being successful in your career, nor by self-indulgence," unquote. So Powell views the Scouts as a way to promote a sense of duty, a sense of purpose, a sense of patriotism, and as an example or a guide to how people can work together on projects and just coexist like that. He was married in 1912 to Olive, and they have 3 children. It is interesting that individuality and ruggedness, and other sort of masculine attributes that Scouting fosters in boys, was rejected by Hitler and by the Nazi Party, the Nazi regime. Hitler considers the Scouting movement to be a dangerous spy organization, very paranoid there, primarily because it doesn't comport, obviously, with statist views in the Nazi regime. By 2007, which is near the centennial anniversary of Scouting, there's approximately 38 million, estimated 38 million members of the Scouts worldwide, including the Girl Guides as well, and that spans about 216 countries. Baden Powell, as a Christian, and an Anglican Christian in particular, he believed that that a belief in God was an important and an indispensable part of Scouting. So the Scouts, again, Boy Scouts, originates as a Christian movement in the beginning there. He writes this, quote, "We aim for the practice of Christianity in their everyday life and dealings, and not merely the profession of theology on Sundays," unquote. So after he retires in 1938, he returns to Africa, where he lives in Kenya, in Nyeri, Kenya. He dies on January 8th, 1941, at the ripe old age of 83, buried also in Kenya. His headstone reads, quote, "Robert Baden Powell, Chief Scout of the World," unquote. Another note, Mount Baden Powell is a mountain here in Southern California in the San Gabriel Mountains, obviously named after him, and fittingly so, for where else is much of the legacy and the life of the Scouting movement going to be active, but in the wilderness, in the mountains of God's creation. So there's another example of an influence and the influence and the reach of the Anglican faith in the world, specifically in America, but also, of course, in Great Britain and worldwide. The Scouting movement, founded by Anglican Lord Robert Baden Powell.